Chapter 7, Section 4. And again, the big idea is that the Constitution gives the executive branch the power to execute, meaning implement, the law. The rules, the president makes them happen. And so some terms we'll see. Obviously, cabinet is kind of the operative word here. The cabinet means that's the official advisor or head of that agency. And I want to remind you that the president represents not just one person, but a large bureaucracy. Literally millions of people work for the president directly and for these various agencies. And so the president is really an institution, not just a person. Okay, so the question I want to ask is, what is the most important function of the executive branch? And like all these questions, I'm going to leave it open-ended because as we unpack this some, the president will have the function of keeping national security at home and abroad. The president will have the authority to oversee social programs like housing and urban development. They will have the authority to oversee and implement programs to stimulate the growth of business, and then also, of course, in the national budget. And so all of these are important, and all of these are exercised at different times. The executive branch is made up of many different assistants. As I said, literally millions of people who carry the duties of the office of the president. So there's no way one person could run our country. There's no way. It doesn't matter how good they are. We are a nation of 350-ish million people and growing. And so we've got to have a very sophisticated system to even try to organize that. And that's where advisors come in. So first off, the obvious one. The White House. The president resides in the White House, but the actual White House is overseen by the Chief of Staff. Now within the White House, these powerful advisors come and work every day. But second, the White House itself is a department, and there's a staff. And when you go, and if you've already gone, you see and you meet many of these security officials, and you'll meet some of the dignitaries, and those people work directly for the Chief of Staff. Secondly, the Office of Management and Budget. These are the people who prepare the federal budget. So Congress creates a budget, and ideally it falls in line with what the president wants. But both departments create a budget for the entire nation every year, and then they haggle over the details. The National Security Council helps with the military and foreign policy. So it was the National Security Advisor who was sitting with President Kennedy when he decided to implement a blockade of Cuba in response to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it was the National Security Advisor representing the National Security Council who helped advise the president through that period. Then there's the Office of Administration. These are the folks who perform the administrative tasks, the actual functionings of the runnings of the government. And so if the Office of Management and Budget approves their budget, Congress agrees to it, then the Office of Administration is going to help work out the details there. There's the Council of Economic Advisors. These are the folks who address employment issues. So this office is going to come up with some of the most sophisticated employment figures in our country each year. They've got to figure out how many people are working. They've got to figure out how many of those people are actually gainfully employed, not just working at Starbucks. You know, are they in career jobs or are they in short-term jobs? How many of those people are fully employed versus part-time? Are they underemployed, meaning are they not earning enough to provide a sustainable living? And so that's the Office of Economic Advisors. Because when they figure out all that data, well, then they got to do something about it. So, for example, the current problem is that unemployment is at an all-time low. Yay, unemployment's at an all-time low. But guess where those jobs are coming from? Well, we've got lots of folks working at Hardee's. Yay, Hardee's. We've got lots of folks working at Walmart. But do Hardee's and Walmart, do they pay a living wage?
No.
No. I've flipped burgers. I've worked at Walmart. I've done about every service job you can think of. Those jobs won't pay you a living wage. They pay you money. If you already have housing and transportation figured out, then great. But if you don't, if you're trying to make a living on that, you are underemployed. That's what we call it. Underemployed. You could even work 2 of those jobs and still not make a sustainable wage. And these folks have to address those issues. How can we fix that? Various theories. Okay, so what we also have to realize is there are many different departments. It's led some to criticize this, say that we have too many, that the government's become too complex, and it's become this vast sort of just faceless machine. And that's why I want you to meet your politicians, because they're a part of this system, and they need to listen to you. But sometimes it can feel so big that you don't think you have a voice in it. And you don't unless you exercise your voice, unless you actually talk to them. Otherwise, they could care less. So, the cabinet members, who are these people? Well, the main advisors are the cabinet. And so, Lauren, these are groups of advisors to the president, and they include... Cabinet is these groups of advisors to the president that include the heads of 14 top-level executive departments. Occasionally, new departments are created. Currently, there are 14 of these. So, what do these people do? Most importantly, they serve the president. The president can't be an expert on foreign policy and the economy. No, both of those things are way too complicated to try to excel at both. In fact, it's not fair to ask one person even to be the nation's leading expert on this. And so we have entire departments to meet the president's needs, to advise him on these issues. Some presidents rely heavily on their cabinet, others less so. Another famous case of this is when Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed away. The honored president who served 3 terms and probably would have served a 4th, never told his vice president about the atomic bomb. Can you imagine? Okay, the president is dead. Harry Truman, yay, you're president. By the way, we can blow up the world. You want to blow up the world? Let's start with Hiroshima. And he had to say yes or no to a question that he didn't even know existed. All right. Presidents rely heavily on first ladies. Recent presidents even have given more responsibility to the vice president. Now, the Constitution outlines the roles of the vice president as president pro tempore of the Senate, meaning they can cast a deciding vote if necessary. There are 100 senators. If there's a dead split, the vice president may cast the deciding vote. They can break a tie. That's kind of neat. But also, some vice presidents work closely with the president, and then some are shut out like Truman was in that case. First ladies often have specific issues that they work to address. Michelle Obama's was school lunches. She wanted kids to be eating healthy. First Lady Trump has been working for a number of social causes and programs, and so do you agree that the president should not be required to act on the advice of cabinet members? And that's something that we have to consider. Maybe the former head of the EPA advised President Trump that climate change is a major issue. He didn't like that advice, and so that person was dismissed, and now we have a new person heading the EPA who removed the words climate change from their website. True story. Yeah. Okay, so the federal bureaucracy has grown over the years and has assumed important roles in public policy. These agencies are the federal bureaucracy. That is the collective agencies and employees of the executive branch. Again, there are millions of these people, but I'll try to generalize here. They are responsible for the daily operations of the federal government. They implement new laws. Let's say a new law were passed that school classroom doors must remain locked during the school day. Okay, man, that one's frustrating, right? But it's got to be done because, well, research has shown, and it's kind of scary that we've done research on this, that when a killer enters a building, the locked doors have surviving students. The unlocked doors have dead students. And it's a very obvious thing. And so, to keep you guys safe, we lock our doors. I get that it's annoying. There's something that has to be done. Well, guess what? It's not a very popular policy. And so people don't want to follow it. Teachers included sometimes. And that means if it's an unpopular policy, that it has to be enforced. And so we have representatives of the federal bureaucracy. Ergo, Officer Gear, who works, again, in the same system, whose job it is to ensure compliance, because ultimately he has to keep us safe. And that's the day-to-day stuff. You know, the big policy is research has shown that a locked door can save lives. It's a worst-case scenario type thing, but again, it has proven to be effective. But that's the day-to-day operation. It's not that exciting, making sure a door is locked. But somebody's got to do it. Also, regulate the activities of businesses and individuals. We do operate on a free enterprise system that if you want to start a business, great. You know, sell your stuff, choose your prices, make your money. But there are rules that you have to follow. You know, for example, you must disclose honest accounts of how much money you make each year. And if you don't, you could get audited by the IRS. Now, there are a number of independent agencies. There are hundreds of these. And they're not particularly parts of the cabinet, but these agencies once more carry out the duties of the functionings of the government. And then these executive agencies work in very specialized areas. The FBI might be one of these executive level agencies. There are government corporations as well. The government does own businesses and operates them and profits from them. And these corporations you can buy stock in are run and owned and operated by the federal government. And guess what? The government has the job of regulating private commerce, once more to ensure fair play and to prevent corruption. And the day-to-day of that is extremely complex. Now, many of these people are appointed to federal positions by the president. You know, let's say that you worked as a campaign official, and thanks to your hard work, voter turnout in Western Carolina was at an all-time high, and it turned out in favor of your candidate. Well, guess what? You did a great job. And that you may have helped get that person elected thanks to your hard work. And you can reasonably expect an important political appointment. It's not unreasonable to expect that you might get some important appointment in that candidate's office. And that's just a way of rewarding loyalty and hard work. There were some who claimed that system can lead to corruption. Because what if I owe Naomi a sum of money? And it has nothing to do with the election, but I owe her a large sum of money. Now I've won the election, and it's understood between her and I, nothing official in writing, but it's understood that in lieu of payment of that sum of money, she will get an important appointment. That is absolutely corrupt. And it absolutely happens. Now that's a problem, because that's not a merit-based system. Naomi may know nothing about that department, may know nothing about running an agency. All she's got going for her is that I owe her, and now I have to appoint her. Instead, the Pendleton Civil Service Act created the civil service system. And that is the practice of hiring government workers based on open, competitive exams. So, for example, we've got a Constitution Quiz Bowl coming up next week. I'll talk to you more about it in a moment, but if any of you want to be interested, I've got a little friendly competition that's going on this week that if you'd like to be a part of, you may certainly join in. And at the end of the week, the students with the highest score will get to go represent our school. True story. It's going to be fun. Now, I could do this in a couple of ways. I have to choose 2 students from the school. I could just say, well, Vaughn's helped us out with scheduling, so we've got all these people. Thanks, Vaughn. I feel like I owe him. Go ahead. Yay. That's not fair, though, is it? Because some of you guys have been working very hard. You just haven't heard back from your people yet. That's not fair. He may or may not be the most qualified to represent our school in knowledge of the Constitution, but a feeling of owing him has nothing to do with that. So instead, I've got an objective, friendly competition to try to implement a merit system, meaning ultimately those 2 students that we send, I want them to be the most knowledgeable of our Constitution. Because after all, we want the best people for the job. And if we're going to truly have a merit-based system, then we have to come up with an objective tool to measure it. So, civil service system, once more, is vast and complex. The idea of a merit-based system is hopefully to overcome the corruption that was inherent in the spoils system. We don't want to appoint Naomi just because we owe her. We want to appoint Naomi because she's the most qualified candidate.